What's up, everybody? I know there's been radio silence for the last few days. It's Sunday. Friday evening was the night that Uriah went to be with the Lord, and that was a pretty rough night. And I've been back and forth on whether I should make another video to, or just wait until the funeral to kind of talk about it. But at the same time, I don't know. I've never prepared a funeral. I've never spoken at a funeral. I've been to a funeral. I've been to a few funerals, but I wanted to kind of just go over what had happened, because I think it might make things a little bit easier when that day comes to kind of get it all out now, and kind of tell you where I'm at, and where my wife is at is probably a little bit different. But so the night that it happened, I'll kind of just go over all that. Uriah had been fighting at low blood oxygen levels for most of that day, and then the day prior as well. Somebody's coming. I'm parked up the road from my house, and somebody's leaving our house. I've actually been gone all day. I've been out in Seymour, which is about an hour and a half from where I live, going and looking at coffins for my son. I don't know who that was. But yeah, so I went and picked out a coffin that was actually, I feel like it's fitting for what Katie and I liked. And anyways, I'm going off. I was distracted by a car. Yeah, so the night that Uriah passed, he had been fighting low oxygen levels all day. His heart rate had been sitting around 160 to 170 for almost 3 days, and so it was just, his heart was, running on hyperdrive. I'll turn this off so I'm not distracted even more. And that night, through all that, things started to dip down. His pulse started getting weaker, his blood pressure, I guess, started getting weaker, and this is what we had seen happen before, when they had to resuscitate him twice because his heart had slowed down and stopped. So they, we kind of knew what was going to happen, because we had seen it twice. And Katie was distraught the first 2 times we had to watch it, and she had even said, I can't watch this again a week prior, before when it happened, and I said that we needed to try one more time, and then after that, we were gonna let him go. And so that night they started doing compressions and had the shock pads on him, and it took him 8 or 9 minutes. They were just beating on him. And before this happened, not to be super graphic, because I don't want my wife to have to relive it, and she doesn't have to watch this video, I guess, but just to kind of paint the picture, he had started having some secretions in his lungs that were, there was some, it looked like blood, but they didn't really allude. They're like, oh, well, it's just, it's pink, it's not that bad. But you could tell, like, every breath he was taking, he was fighting for every breath, and it was brutal to watch. It was terrible to watch. And so when the compressions and all that stuff started, it was just, it was crazy. Like, there was blood on the floor, that was coming out of his mouth, and there was, I'm pretty sure, pee. I don't know. It was chaos for 8 minutes, and my wife, I told her to leave because she was in the corner just, like covering her ears and rocking back and forth. And I was like, you need to get out of here. And I stayed and I watched, and he came back, and I got to go over there, and I'm holding him and telling him I love him, and that if he goes if the Lord wanted to take him, because I was tired of seeing my son. He was already in such a weak state. Just every part of his physical body was so battered, and after that I'm just like, I just watched. There's still blood on the floor. They're trying to wipe the blood off of him so that we don't see it, but I know, and I'm glad they did, so my wife didn't have to see that. And I went and got Katie and told her, like, you need to come in here, and we need to be with him, and his eyes were open, and his eyes were actually more alert and more focused, because like you guys might have noticed, but his vision was he was just looking off into wherever. So it was like he wasn't fully there, even though we saw him kind of look a couple times. That was the first time I had seen him, which I'm sure the epi had something to do with that, but it was like he was there, and I know he was probably in pain from what he just went through. And so I got Katie, she came back in the room, and we were face to face with him. Our heads were on his head, and I knew that that was the last moments that we were going to spend with him, because they were going to do it again. And we had said before, hey, three times, that was it. And he started to code again as they were feeling his pulse, and we told him, no, don't. And they're like, you don't want us to, like, and we're like, no, this is it. And so we held Uriah, and we each had our head on his head, and I watched my son leave his body. And that was the hardest. The whole thing was hard, but it was hard to know that was the last time I was going to see life behind the eyes in the vessel that has carried my son, has operated in while he's been on this earth. And it was obviously hard. I know everybody's like, how are you guys doing? You're doing what I would be doing for anybody that had just lost a child. You guys are trying to formulate something to say, because there is nothing to say that's going, to... I love all of the messages that we have got. It really has. It's helped. But really, I haven't been able to really even go through them all, because I'm just still going through this process of, is this it? This is it? And I know that it's it. I know that my son he's gone. He's with the Lord. And that brings me peace. It genuinely does. If I didn't have my faith and I thought that was it and he's just gone, that would be a lot harder for me. But another thing before I keep going on, which maybe seems irrelevant to this whole story, but they had been talking about wanting to do another blood transfusion, and we were hesitant just like we were before, but we finally were like, yeah, let's do this blood transfusion if it's going to help, even though they really didn't think it would. They're grasping at straws at this point. And we did the same thing that we did before. We prayed over the blood, and I felt the Lord as I was praying over it, probably more so than the first time. And he was in a rough spot, but we didn't think that it was going to go that direction. Like, we were still in the same place as everybody else. Like, God's going to restore him. And they hooked up the blood, and this is right before he coded. It was like, I watched the blood going down the IV, and I was literally texting out a message to somebody else about that we like, hey, we're doing another blood transfusion. We prayed over it. I'm believing that, like, this is the blood of Jesus, and as this goes into his body, it's going to go to every part of him, and it's going to, even though we know that this blood is from somebody else, this is what we're believing and praying for, that as it works through his body, it's going to restore him fully. And it was like the moment that it touched him and started going into his veins was the moment that everything started to go awry. And so there's a couple ways that I've like run through that scenario in my head. It's like, well, when he passed, I know he was fully restored, and from that one drop, it was like it was enough to restore him fully. And yeah, that night we we didn't know how to leave. We didn't, it was, that happened at 7. I think he passed. I don't remember the exact time that he passed, but we did all this stuff, like got some handprints of him and some other stuff, and we're laying there with him, just it's crazy. Like, most people have been to a funeral, unfortunately, at some point in their life, and you see that person in the box, and it's like, it's weird because you know that it's them, but you know it's not them because they're not in there. That is, like, it was weird because when they're in a coffin, it's cold, and Uriah was still, he was still warm, but we decided we were going to stay there with him. We stayed the night in the hospital. They let us keep him in the room with us, and Katie slept on the couch, and I actually slept in bed with his body. And we prayed over him. We prayed, God, we know you're able to heal. We know you're able to bring dead people back to life. And that night I asked Katie, I'm like, should we make a post to let people know? We decided no, and I agree with her because I didn't want anybody to know about Uriah passing because Enoch was with my parents, and I did not want anybody to tell my son about Uriah going to heaven but me. Like, I needed to be the one to tell my son that and try to walk through. That was probably, that's the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life, other than what we had just gone through. And but that night, we prayed over him, and we're like, I still know that God is capable of doing anything. I know that he is. And it was hard for us to leave the hospital and leave our son, even though I know that my son was not inside of that shell that was his body. It was like, that is what I knew physically. Like, that was my son. And to walk away from his corpse, or even to have them take that with them, was like, can we just keep it here with us? And that morning when I woke up next to him, and we're praying over him again and giving him our final goodbye kisses, and his body's a lot colder. And as we kissed him, it's like the body, there's fluid, like blood and stuff started coming out of his nose and fluid. And it's just, I'm only painting the picture because I don't know. I know everybody wants to know, but they don't want to ask. And when somebody dies, it's like, you want to know, but you don't want to ask, because it's like, you don't want to bring up these emotions for people to think about, for the people who had the loss to have to relive that. So I'm just getting it all out, and then you guys know the magnitude of the situation. And I'll call you back, Tyler. So since then, we drove home early that morning. We were up at 5 o'clock. We left the hospital at probably 5:30. We got home, and we showed up at my parents' house, and my parents were so excited, but then, like, quickly the reality set in when they saw both of us walk into the house. And I took Enoch into the back room by myself, because I knew I had to be the one to tell him. And I was praying the whole way home, like, God, give me strength to be strong enough to, like, not lose my shit in front of my son. And as soon as I sat him on the bed, and he was so excited to be with me, and I went to tell him, I just broke, because I was his best friend. And to try to explain to your kid that his best friend is gone, and that his brother, is not coming back, and then you're trying to explain he's with heaven, he's in heaven, he's with Jesus, he's in a better place, and yet I'm crying. And it's like, Well, then why are you crying? And yeah, it just so much. And then he's like, oh, Daddy, if you're sad, he's like, I've got something to show you. Come look at my new racetrack. Because he just wants me to be happy. And he doesn't understand fully. But then I know that it set in because as he went, I talked to him a little bit more, and as he went out there, my mom gave him a hug, and we're all crying, and we go back in the room. He goes back in the room with Katie, and he's just asking us the most innocent questions that are like, how do you explain death to a child? And yeah, it was brutal. And Enoch he's so strong. Like all day yesterday, he just was asking us little questions like, so God took Enoch, huh? He's like, that's really weird. He's like, but he's in a better place. And will we ever, how does that work? Because I don't think he understood that, like, he physically thought like his body and everything just like went to heaven, which I get because he hasn't got to see Uriah's body. And that's going to be a whole nother thing. And so I'm trying to explain him because he loves robots. Like, oh, well, on certain shows, like the robot, there's a guy inside of the robot operating it. That's kind of like your body, and your soul and your spirit is inside of you. And that's his spirit and his soul, which I don't even fully understand spirit and soul, but he's with the Lord, but his body's still here. And when he gets to heaven, he's going to get a new body, and he's not going to be sick anymore. And he's not going to, and yeah, it's just so much to try. And he's doing really good. I mean, we slept with, he's sleeping with us now. And, I don't know. I love both of my boys so much, but I'm so happy to get to love my son and hold my son, and how much more, not that I didn't value that's the greatest thing I've ever got was both of my kids. And it's like, part of your heart is, you don't even know you don't know. Like, I don't fully know. I'm like walking through this day by day, I don't know. I'm sure it's going to be a roller coaster, but anyways, yeah, I know that his life has impacted a lot of people, and he's impacted my life and changed me and made me a better man. And the plan is the funeral is going to be Sunday, and I don't know that we're going to do it at James River now because we couldn't use the big auditorium, and I don't know how many people are going to come, but the only reason we were going there was thinking that if a fraction of the people that had been participating, which I know there was people from all over, and I don't expect that many people to show up, but if a quarter of them showed up, there'd probably be 1,000 people. And so we just wanted to make sure there was room for everybody that wanted to come. And that'll be funeral / celebration of life. And I'm going to say this, and I'm going to preface it in a way so you don't think I'm totally insane, even though, I understand fully and I accept fully that my son is gone, he's dead, that his soul, his spirit, whatever, is with the Lord, and he's at peace. And that brings a lot of joy and happiness to me to know that. And I'm glad that he's not in pain anymore. And I'm glad that we're not having to watch our son suffer and be separated from our other son. And this has changed our whole life. Everything that we do is different now. And we're going to get through it. But there's the other part of me that is like, I won't have total closure on my son. I know he's dead. I know that